Hi there, I'm Nicole Ringgold. In this demo, I'm going to show you how to make these feather hoops. I start by printing out a template from Shutterstock of feathers that I find attractive, cut them out, and use rubber cement to paste them to my 22 gauge sterling silver sheet. Once the rubber cement dries, then you'll use a 3/0 saw blade to saw out the feathers. At this point, don't worry too much about the outer details because you can go back in and saw those out. I don't include the feather stem, so to speak, nor the itty-bitty wispy details at the bottom. Instead, I pass right over that. Those details will be added later with sterling silver wire. Once I've sawed out the feathers, then I pull off the paper and rub off the rubber cement. The silver will be dirty, and so I like to anneal my silver, which is a foolproof way of cleaning it and ensuring that it's malleable. So here's the regular soldering flame with the little Smith torch, oxypropane, and now I'm adding propane to make the soft annealing flame. I heat my piece until when I pull away, it's black. Then I throw it in the pickle until it turns white. By pickling your piece after annealing, it will allow you to watch the colors change as you're soldering in the next couple of steps. I then take 16 gauge sterling silver round wire and I snip it so that it's just a little bit longer than the feather to include the stem that we omitted during the sawing process. I use a cutoff wheel. Here is the product number. I use this to taper the wire at one end. I also use it to bevel the edges of the silver because if you look at the silver straight on, it looks boxy, just like a sterling silver sheet would look. So I use it to bevel the edges both on the top and on the bottom. Take a Sharpie and mark the center line of the feather both on the top and on the underside. For this step, it's very important that your metal is annealed, otherwise your burr in the next step will go dull super quickly. So here is a set of crosscut cylinder burrs. I'm using one of the smallest of the set. And I'm going to carve into, from the line outward, into the silver. And I'm digging pretty deeply. I'm not afraid to dig deep, otherwise your texturing might come out with polishing and sanding later on. And again, I'm doing this on both the front and the back side of the feathers. Once that's complete, I will go back and saw out some additional detailing into the sides of the feathers. Take your 16 gauge wire and just use your fingers to gently bend it to match the shape of the feather. You'll use easy solder and you'll lay the solder on the surface and you're going to be sweating it to the 16 gauge wire. Flux. It's easiest to pick solder, so I'm heating the solder, not my pick, and I have to make sure that my pick is clean to be able to pick up the solder and transfer it to that 16 gauge wire. Heat the wire until the solder puddles, so you're sweat soldering to the wire. I'll try to get closer so that you can see that a little bit better. Once this is done, you'll transfer the wire to the feathers. You're only doing this on one side. Be sure you're fluxing the feathers and then transferring the wire over. I'm not worried about the wire being super flush because what I'm going to do is heat the mass. So I'm going to focus my torch on the sheet below the wire, in which case the wire will automatically slump. And by heating the mass, I'm drawing the solder from the wire down below to the sheet. Next up, similar technique, but this time with 20 gauge wire. I bent it with my thumbs, I'm sweating easy solder to the 20 gauge wire on the platform before transferring it to the feathers, where I'll heat the mass. And once again, by heating the mass, it will draw the solder from the wire all beneath the wire along the sheet. So here I've transferred the wire. Now I'm turning on my torch, which is oxypropane Little Smith, and I'm heating the mass, waiting for the solder to flow from the wire downward so that it solders the wire to the sheet. I'm not putting any of the wire on the back side of the sheet. Instead, I'm going to use the natural curve of the hoops to act as that center wire, or the center line for the feathers. And then the process will be the same. I'll flux, and then I'm going to heat the mass, sweat easy solder to the wire, and then heat the feather down below to draw the solder from the wire down underneath. From here, it's optional if you want to add additional wire to the front side. I'm taking some 18 gauge wire, bending it with my fingers, and then I'm going to snip it to make some additional wispies so that the feathers look more whimsical. Of course, you're welcome to add as much wire as you want, or you can leave them simple like this. I'm going to add some additional pieces of both 20 and 18 gauge. Once you've added as many wispies as you want, take your flush cutters and snip off anything that's sticking out or pokey. Return to your flex shaft and then use that same cutoff wheel that you used in the beginning, and here I use it to taper down the edge of those wispies. And then I also use it to go into the sides of the feather to give them a little bit more of a soft, well, feathery appearance. From here, I use a black silicone disc. Again, here's the product number. And this can be a pretty sloppy process, so wear a mask. I use this to soften all of the edges, the wispies, the hoops, the edges of the feathers, so that nothing is sticking out and pokey. I use my pliers to give the feather a little bit of movement. I use a coarse fiber wheel to brush the silver so that it has a brushed appearance and not high sheen. I have found that this also allows the silver to absorb the liver of sulfur more consistently across its surface. To apply liver of sulfur, I like to use the chips that I put in room temperature water. I use an annealing flame to heat my piece and then paint the liver of sulfur onto my piece when it's warm. And then I use a white sunburst radial disc to remove some of that liver of sulfur. Then I wash with warm water and soap. And that's it. I would love for you to comment below and tell me how it goes. Thank you.